I'm Brian Rauf. That is Connor Hope, both of Heat Check CBB here on the Sleepers Media YouTube channel to break down Kansas's 78-66 victory over Oklahoma on Saturday. Connor, we talked about this potentially being a close game, the one that Kansas certainly had the advantage in. It played out that way. DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams both played all 40 minutes for Kansas. Kevin McCullough played 38 minutes. There was the lack of depth concerns for Kansas that we had discussed, but ultimately the overall talent level of Kansas appeared to be too much in this game as they kind of wore Oklahoma down at the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's you don't want to see players playing 40 minutes regularly. But when you have KJ Adams, who had 15 and 10, 0 turnovers, you have Harris, who had his patented 7 points, 8 assists, 0 turnovers. Kevin McCullough played 39 minutes of the 40. Right. It's tough to pull guys out when they're playing that well and that efficiently. And I understand Harris went 3 of 10 from the field, made one of his 2 threes, wasn't shooting the ball particularly well. KJ Adams was not shooting the ball particularly well either, but they weren't making mistakes. This was basically mistake-free basketball for Kansas, outside of the fact that they lost the battle on the boards, which we had discussed with Oklahoma and their ability to rebound. And the threes weren't falling for anyone. I said Harris made one of his 2 threes. That was the best 3-point shooting percentage on the team for Kansas.
Yeah, so, only 3 made threes for the Jayhawks on the game, which Oklahoma was much better. They were 6 of 20.
Yeah, right. So big difference in this game, not the difference. Obviously, it's only 5 points. Kansas makes 95% of their 18 free throw attempts. Oklahoma only makes 70% of their 17. Pretty even game, pretty close game. It was a 1-point game at the half, and Kansas just blew it open in the second half, which is, given their depth concerns, the most surprising part of this game is that Kansas kind of slow played the first half in terms of building that lead, and they just ratcheted up the defense in the second half. And it led to a 12-point victory.
Yeah, you mentioned the short bench. Only 6 guys played more than 7 minutes for Kansas. That's kind of what we've come to expect from this team. It's been more than enough when they've played teams like Oklahoma. Oklahoma is certainly a good team and showed that in this game, but there also was a clear talent advantage. I think Oklahoma would have liked to have gotten more than 10 minutes from Hewley in this game. I know he's been a big swing point for them in the middle, but 4 fouls in those 10 minutes limited his production. And I think that plays to the impact Hunter Dickinson had in this game. 24 points, 14 rebounds, 5 blocks. Like, that is a stellar stat line that I think also maybe undersells the impact he had in this game. Like, there was a stretch where he could really do whatever he wanted. We also talked about on the Oklahoma side of things, needing Javion McCollum to be a superstar. And he had 17 points. He played well. The 6 turnovers were a problem. It felt like he was not dictating things, which certainly not a rarity for opposing guards in Allen Fieldhouse. That tends to happen. But I thought he played okay, didn't play great. And I don't know if Oklahoma's at a point where they can win these kind of games against Kansas level competition without McCollum playing great and being a superstar.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument that, and McCollum obviously had the 6 turnovers. A lot of that had to do with Harris and the other guards. Right. Harris had 3 steals. You could make the argument that despite the 7 points, this might have been the most complete game that Harris has played since the Kentucky game. Just mistake-free table-setting basketball, which is what you come to expect from Harris in his career. And he played that to perfection, especially in the second half of this game. I am very pleased with what I saw from Kansas in that second half, given the fact that they don't have the deepest bench. They had one bench player play more than 10 points in this game, and that was Jackson, who played 18. He's the obvious name. Parker Braun played 7 minutes. They got 4 minutes outside of their top 7. So this is a team that runs very short you would expect given the minutes played at this. Like, I would have been less surprised if it was flipped, where Kansas jumps out to an early 11-point lead and then wins the second half by a point or something like that. But I was impressed. I was impressed with basically every player on this Kansas team outside of, maybe, I don't know, Furphy played okay. Like, he was just kind of there. You forget that him and Jackson are on the floor at times, because it really is the top four. But this Kansas team is, from a starting lineup perspective, about as complete as any team in the country.
Yeah. So Kansas avoids a second straight loss. Oklahoma suffers it. The schedule kind of lightens up for both in the at least by Big 10 standards, or Big 12 standards, Big 12 standards. Oklahoma State, West Virginia, both on the road, but that's on deck for Kansas. Both of those teams rank outside the top 100 Ken Palm. That's about as easy of a stretch as you're going to find in the Big 12. Oklahoma gets to go back home to face West Virginia to kind of hopefully get things back on track for them before going and playing at Cincinnati, who has been tough, but newcomer to the league. So moving forward, I want to talk about each of these teams and what this result, what you've kind of seen from them moving forward. We'll start with the Oklahoma side of things. But does this result, 12-point loss, but does this give you more or less confidence in Oklahoma moving forward?
I'm going to say probably solidifies my confidence. So I don't know if it's more or less, but the fact that they were able to keep it close in Fog Allen Fieldhouse for the first half of this game. And I know Kansas blew it wide open in the second half, but like, that's what Kansas does at home. Right. And the fact that it was as close, and Oklahoma was scoring as well as they were in that first half, I think gives me a little bit more confidence. I understand they have 2 straight losses, both of them on the road, both of them to top 20 teams in terms of how good I think they are, both TCU and Kansas. And you're looking at an Oklahoma team that, you said it, I mean, their next 6 games are games that they should win, right? They have home against West Virginia, home against Texas and Texas Tech, or I don't know about Texas, but Texas and Texas Tech on paper are probably the 2 toughest teams that they play, both at home. Their road games are Kansas State, Cincinnati, and UCF, which not easy games because it's the Big 12, and we've seen how good those teams are. We've seen UCF beat Kansas, but I do think that that's a very winnable 6-game stretch for Oklahoma. They'll probably go 4-2, 5-1, just because it's the Big 12. But even if they do that, like, that still keeps them in that top 20 to 25 conversation at the floor for Oklahoma. And their schedule really, there's the tough 1-2 combo at Baylor, home to Kansas, and then another tough one at Iowa State, home to Houston. But it's really not a terrible schedule for Oklahoma to continue racking up wins, to continue, gaining confidence as we head into March. And the Big 12 tournament and the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, we talked about this in the preview, but I think Oklahoma is solidly a top 25 team. I don't think that they are good enough to compete at this level where Kansas is, but I think that their performances have shown that that's kind of where they are. They just don't have the horses or the gas in the tank to go up to the level where Kansas is. This
is a well-coached, well-oiled machine for Oklahoma, where if you get into a situation where you're playing matchup basketball against teams like Kansas, you're going to lose. But as we saw in the first half, if they're playing the way that they're coached by Porter Moser, they're going to win a bunch of games, and they're going to rack up wins against top 25 teams. Like, they're not going to go winless against that stretch of 4 teams that I mentioned in Iowa State, Baylor, Kansas, and Houston. I think they pick up a win, maybe even 2 in that stretch, considering that 2 of those games are at home. So I like Oklahoma. I think that they are definitely a threat to make a second weekend. That's about where I have them at their ceiling.
Yeah, and I don't think anything changes from Kansas from this. It was a business-like good performance at home. I still think one of the best teams in the country. questions about their upside and some of the nitpicky stuff that we have comes more into play when discussing them among the other top teams in the country. But I mean, this team is still very much in the top tier nationally, and flex their muscle again against the Sooners.
Yeah, and I think with Kansas too, they, in my opinion, have a much tougher rest of the season schedule than Oklahoma. Just looking at their schedule, you mentioned that it's Oklahoma State, West Virginia, Cincinnati are the next three, but then it's at Iowa State, you get the Oklahoma State, but then it's Houston, at Kansas State, Baylor, at Texas Tech, at Oklahoma, Texas, who's maybe not a good team, but a talented team, BYU, at Baylor, and then they finish the season at Houston. So this is a very tough schedule for Kansas, which is good because I think Kansas is a team that both you and I can agree on is a national title threat. And the only downside to this schedule is given the depth concerns that we have and the fact that we just saw in a game against Oklahoma at home, they had to play 3 players, basically 40 minutes. I know McCullough wasn't 40, but 39 is basically 40 minutes in college basketball. Can they do that for this entire stretch of games and still have gas left in the tank to win a national title? That's my only concern with Kansas. My concern with Kansas has nothing to do with talent, nothing to do with how good they are. It simply has everything to do with, can they stay healthy? Can they stay, at the top of their conditioning? Can they have gas left in the tank when we get into Big 12 tournament play and the NCAA tournament to make a 6-game run in March? And that's my only concern.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Like, the conversation with Kansas is so far down the road. We know what they are, still the Big 12 favorites, right? But I think Oklahoma, you can start having that same kind of conversation. We want to see some wins before this 2-game losing streak turns into more than that. But I think we both feel pretty confident about what the Sooners can do moving forward. Once again, that's Connor Hope. I'm Brian Rauf of Heat Check CBB here on the Sleepers Media YouTube channel. We're breaking on this game and all the other big games around the country coming up this week. So make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things that every podcast and show tells you to do, because those things do matter. When you do, we'll be back and we'll see you next time.